Hi, that was easy. Anyway.
You need a button that says that.
Yeah. So let's see. I think it's right at time. Is it time? Okay. So hi there. So let me talk about how this presentation came about. I don't know about you, but just out of curiosity, how many of you, like, you see all the stuff going on with cryptocurrency, you see all the stuff going on with NFTs, and you think, what the hell are people thinking? You know, I mean, that's like the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm like seeing people like bored ape faces, like all of a sudden somebody went ahead and, you know, they spent $100,000 to license an image, okay, but then it gets stolen, like they have no concept of digital rights, and all of a sudden they have to spend $200,000 to buy the rights back for a stupid monkey face that they could have redrawn on their own. I mean, these things are baffling to me. And then I see all these things where, for example, you know, cryptocurrency, people get robbed for like billions of dollars literally, and everybody's out there like, oh, it's okay, it's all secure, it's on the blockchain. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I keep posting these things on LinkedIn and other places, and I'll tell you, the crypto bros hate me. I don't know how many times I've been told I know nothing about cybersecurity, because there I go all of a sudden saying, oh, you know, like FTX, for example, is a critical example of everything wrong with blockchain and crypto. And these people are like, you know absolutely nothing about this. And I'm like, how could you say that? Literally, billions of dollars have gone away. And they're like, well, technically, he just took the money and never bought the crypto, so therefore nobody actually stole crypto. I'm like, and this is okay with you? And this is kind of the logic of all these people who are out there, like, you know, going on about Web3, cryptocurrency, the Metaverse, and everything like that. And the problem is, I start looking at cybersecurity unfortunately, some cybersecurity companies, I'll say it that way, but I look at all the other companies out there thinking, how can I get on the Metaverse? How can I go ahead and do things? And people are getting on the Metaverse without putting any thought into these things. They just get there because it's the thing to do, it's so cool. I remember seeing, I was actually in Jordan, the country of Jordan, and what happened was I was watching CNN International, and this reporter was interviewing this guy who was like CEO of some metaverse company, like Meta, but not Meta. And he's like telling her, and he drives up in like this Lamborghini, and she's like, this is so cool. I'm like, this isn't really a Lamborghini. You understand that, don't you? And then she gets on, and it's like, oh, I'm flying now. I'm like, you're not flying. You're watching a computer program fly. You do understand this. And they apparently don't. And this is the problem. So anyway, when I started looking at this, and Tracy and I were talking about these things, all of a sudden you start to realize that there's so many issues that people are ignoring because they're trying to just get on there without doing anything or consideration of cybersecurity and stuff. So we're going to go pretty quick. Normally Tracy and I would switch off, but you know, we're going to just take blocks of slides. So if I cut Tracy off, it's because she took too long of a dramatic pause, not because I'm being a bully. But anyway,
I'm used to it.
Yeah, there's a disclaimer. I don't know what it says, but you know, cut the slides if you actually care.
It's in the book. You can read it later.
So anyway, what's the Web3 metaverse and stuff? And that comes under the category of who's asking. You know, that's my old New Yorker comment. Well, who's asking? Anyway, it's pretty much self-imposed definitions for whoever wants to make a definition up. So when you look at it, it's like, well, what's Web3? I'm like, what do you want it to be? Give me money. I'll tell you that's exactly what it is. And that's what literally people are doing there. And they also think it's kind of something really new and revolutionary, but it's literally been around, you know, in one form or another since like the 1980s technically, but people want to forget that. Web3 people think the term is anything with blockchain for the most part. The metaverse itself, and we're kind of including the metaverse with Web3 because in many ways the metaverse is the embodiment of what Web3 is. Yes, there's crypto, but crypto's embedded in it. And the idea for all these Web3 people is to try to merge NFTs, crypto, Metaverse into like one big concept. So that's how we're going to present it. But the first time the term Metaverse was used, it was in, what's his name, Neil Gibson or something? It did, yeah, I'm bad at names. I can't remember her name, let alone, you know, some author 20 years ago. But anyway, so there was like the term, like back in the book, Snow Crash, and pretty much it was a 3D virtual world and so on. But then when you start looking at it, what have been the embodiments of Web3 or the Metaverse in one way or another? First, you had IRC chat. Anybody remember IRC chat? It's still around in 4chan, on 8chan. It's kind of gone in really dark ways recently. But I mean, there you had people pretty much insulting each other, calling everybody losers and stuff. They'd get on dial-up bulletin boards just to do this. And I'm like, they're literally dialing up to like be bullied on stuff and things like that. It was kind of funny. But anyway, then you have, I don't know how many people ever saw that, but that's BattleTech. BattleTech this was actually a physical center. It's kind of like BattleTech is now a game you can play online where you're controlling these mechs, these big robots that go and fight each other and stuff. But they literally had these centers where you can go and sit down in a cockpit, and all these cockpits were networked together. And I actually did one in Chicago. It was really kind of super cool at the time. I'll date it, 1994-ish or so. So anyway, sorry about that. And then there's Doom. Doom was the first one I ever saw. I remember I was consulting for a friend. I was on their board of advisors, and this was like the late 1990s, actually. And they're like, Ira, it's like, come on, we're all going to play Doom after work. Do you want to, we'll set you up on a system. I'm like, so in other words, after sitting at a computer all day at work, you think I'm going to spend all night sitting here in the office playing this? I go, no way. But anyway, that's what they were doing. All these nerds were getting together to play Doom in the office after work hours. Then we have CompuServe. How many people remember that? And then of course, there's Second Life. How many people remember Second Life? How many people know Second Life is actually still around? I mean, Second Life is around. You could still buy Linden bucks. An IBM, I don't know how many people remember this, but everybody was trying to buy big buildings in Second Life. Like, I was working for HP. HP bought a building. I'm like, why? And then IBM bought a building. IBM made a big deal that they wanted to do everything in Second Life. And they were paying Second Life millions of dollars to hold these events where they would try to get the whole IBM workforce all together. And all these employees had to sit around for like an hour to create their own little avatar. And then they'd take these avatars to get together for a big corporate meeting. And all these people would be walking into walls trying to find the meeting spot. And then I had one guy, and he's like, Ira, you don't know the half of this. Because people couldn't even, if you couldn't even fit in this stupid virtual room that should theoretically be as large as infinite if you wanted to, but they only bought this certain area and they had to stick to the geography of the area. Everybody was sitting outside and couldn't get in to listen to it. That's how bad it was. Then there was, of course, World of Warcraft, made popular, if by nothing else, South Park. And then everybody was playing World of Warcraft and getting on there. And then we had, oh yeah, I have to pay special homage. How many people remember the only reason to be on the internet, which is Leroy Jenkins? Leroy Jenkins is like my hero because he's the only thing that every so often you get depressed, you watch Leroy Jenkins on YouTube.
You didn't say it right, by the way.
Oh, say it.
Leroy Jenkins.
So anyway, Leroy Jenkins saved the world. Then you had Halo. Halo was kind of the first killer app that was out there. People would line up, made Microsoft a whole bunch of money. And, that was pretty much the big one. Then you had Fortnite. Fortnite was when I first started realizing people could get robbed on the internet and all this sort of stuff. Because those unicorn hammers don't come cheap, So people would go ahead and hack accounts and then sell off people's stash. I think they probably did it on World of Warcraft, but Fortnite was where it really started coming up. Does anybody know anybody who works for the company that owns Fortnite? Because, oh, okay, I want to get with you later because they will not do a damn thing when you get robbed. And that's not for me. When you start helping people, People get robbed and they don't do anything. They don't even have the name of the company publicly listed that owns Fortnite. So anyway, then you have Pokemon Go, which was kind of the first killer augmented reality app, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So anyway, then you have all these others I just threw in. Everybody's like, why is Waze up there? When you think about it, Waze is kind of a metaverse in some ways itself, because in Waze you have all these people interacting, telling you where the police are, for example, and so on, you know, giving you and helping you get to where you're going and things. So it's kind of an augmented reality, and then all these other places allow for interactions as well, exchange of money. I should have put up OnlyFans as well now, but that's a separate thing. Twitter, I almost want to get down and replace with OnlyFans at this point. But anyway, then you have broad characteristics of what makes all these things there. First place, blockchain. You know, yes, there's blockchain involved in things and so on. And then I put the term beauty is in the eye of the beholder, because broad characteristics are like, a lot of these things to me really suck. But people are willing to spend a lot of money on there, like Bored Ape and stupid NFTs. I have no idea why, but Gary Vaynerchuk is making a fortune off of those things, but good for him. Then you have to have some form of online interaction to really have a metaverse and things. Then usually some form of financial transaction. Frankly, cryptocurrency is pretty much only a financial transaction. So it could be a little piece, but a lot of piece. Companies want to move on there, make a virtual component so people don't have to go to the real world to shop, obviously, and then immersion. So the benefits, pretty much e-commerce can really, really explode when you're starting to consider the metaverse, blockchain, Web3 as a whole, and so on. And then, you know, you have investment vehicles, which is pretty much the whole thing of cryptocurrency. I mean, it's kind of like I was once saying, why is the Mona Lisa so valuable? And it's because somebody says it is. Why is Bitcoin so valuable or so crappy at any point in time? And it's because somebody says it is. There's nothing behind it. There's no infrastructure to keep it at any given value. But yet the value is somehow embedded and people somehow acknowledge this value. You know, more immersive, I'll go on. Anyway, but really at the end of the day, it's really just a more immersive, Web 2, for lack of a better way of expressing it. So anyway, you can go. Yeah, thanks. Oh.
You have the clicker. You always have the clicker. So we broke it down into a couple of different things to look at virtual reality versus augmented reality. And if you look at virtual reality, you're immersed in something new, in a new world, in a new environment. And you can overcome the constraints of reality. You can have superpowers, you can do new things that normally in real life you wouldn't. So that's part of what's being virtual. The thing about it is when it comes to privacy, do you really have it? Because if you think deeply about privacy in a virtual world, the host or whoever has the platform control has to know what it is that you're doing. So you can't really hide what's going on there. So for example, if you happen to be in Second Life or some other platform,
sorry, Tracy doesn't want, I'll tell you what Tracy's avoiding saying. In Second Life, people go to S&M shops for some reason.
I was going to say a house of ill repute.
Well, so anyway, but if you go there, somebody says, oh, I have privacy. I'm like, no, you don't. Second Life has to know exactly where you wanted to go and what you intended to do and what you are doing there in order for that functionality to exist.
So we shouldn't expect privacy where that's concerned. And then we have an augmented world where this is, we're directly dealing with real life. It's showing augmentation around us of what's going on. Pokemon Go is an excellent example of this. And as mentioned earlier with Waze, it's kind of sort of a thing of augmented reality as well. We had a situation not too long ago where a woman was going down the wrong way on a one-way street. So information may not be correct, and we need to take care of these situations. The host can tell what you're doing, and if you're using an application like Waze, they can triangulate addresses and have an idea of what your intentions are. So privacy is still a matter of subjectivity. Mm-hmm. So we look at fundamental flaws. How many of you have ever tried to contact an exchange or cryptocurrency, metaverse, anything like that? Tried? Were you successful? Did you get your dispute resolved? Probably not. How many of people have been robbed in a metaverse? That's good. Not yet. but it could be coming. So
No, they're just not admitting it. Let's face
yeah,
it.
we're not admitting it.
They know their kid got ripped off in Fortnite, for example.
And which is sad. That's sad. But it's typically impossible to communicate with people who own these metaverse. And so it requires moderation. And that can take a lot of resource time, a lot of resource money, and it's something that we don't see, if at all. And then we have digital currency. So we have all kinds of flaws with this. Let's see. You have this one.
Oh, okay. Oh, I do? Okay.
Yep.
So anyway, proprietary coins are frankly non-transferable. How many of you have ever bought Linden Bucks back in Second Life, which then I thought it just went away. I never bought them, but it seems like a lot of people did, and they just kind of are irrelevant. Bitcoin's pretty much untraceable, so you can be robbed again and again and again, and nobody would ever be able to track it down. Yes, the FBI was able to track down, and I want to be very specific, a portion of the Colonial Pipeline ransomware, but that was only because the criminals were really, really stupid. If the criminals were smarter, they wouldn't have got their they wouldn't have been able to recover any cryptocurrency. And the portion they did not recover was 15%, and that's because it went to, I think it was the shadow brokers. The shadow brokers were essentially the software developers, and the shadow brokers were smart enough to say, once you steal the money, you give us our 15% cut now, and we get rid of it. We hide it, and that 15% is gone forever. The other 85% was by people who actually were stupid enough to go ahead and not know how to launder the money that they stole. Then you have decentralized financing. I was on some webinar, everybody's like praising decentralized financing. We don't need any intermediaries. We don't have this, we don't have that. But yet when billions of dollars gets lost, it's like, oh, well, that's just the cost of decentralized financing, and everybody's okay with that for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not. But anyway, it's great if you're on the receiving side. If I am a criminal, I love cryptocurrency. I love the capability to get money, get rid of it really, really quickly, and have it in some bank account in Cyprus transferred back to the US, and nobody knows where it ever came from. And that's kind of a good thing. But you know, you have to deal with complaints if there are issues. So for example, if you own your metaverse, like if you are a metaverse provider, which is part of the audience for this session as well, you have to deal with people who are getting ripped off on your sites and so on. So keep that in mind.
And this is where identity becomes an issue, because of course we have authentication, but how do you really know? If you're in a metaverse and somebody says that you're a doctor, how do you confirm that? How do you know? How will I know that you're a real doctor? I'm just saying, it could happen. Or a psychologist, even if they're not issuing out scripts, they're still providing some kind of a service and you're trusting in them. We need to know whether or not they're authenticated. And then appearance, we have digital twins, we have people who can pick up skins and appear as somebody who they aren't really. And this can be a lead into different kinds of crime, to, let's see, what do you call it? What am I thinking? Kids.
Oh, this is catfishing, or
there you go.
Or pedophiles and grooming and stuff like that.
Yeah. And account hacking, of course. I know you have a story around this one.
Yeah, do I? I probably do. I'll get back to it. I forgot. I thought this was Tracy's slide, so I zoned out. Anyway. Anyway, well, okay, I'll take client vulnerability. So anyway, I don't know if you guys all know, like on the client side, here's what happens the way a metaverse works. Everybody kind of thinks like, oh, it's all in the cloud. Metaverse generally doesn't work all in the cloud. It downloads software so that there's control of your avatars, there's interaction on your local systems. So for example, if you're playing Fortnite, whatever system you're on is basically going ahead and controlling the displays, seeing where you go and all that sort of stuff. And the problem is, if you can figure out how to hack that, you can screw over the metaverse. So for example, in Pokemon Go, people are like, you know, it's very geography dependent. People can go ahead and basically pick themselves up and move to some other location. There was another case where, does anybody know Gary McGraw? I mean, Gary McGraw is a really, really smart person. I mean, I hate him because he's a better speaker than I am. But the reality is with Gary, he was telling a story one year at RSA where one of his friends was able to go ahead, they downloaded Pirates of the Caribbean software, and what happened was, you know, this is Pirates of the Caribbean online, and the guy saw that it was in JavaScript, and he was able to reprogram the JavaScript that was downloaded onto his system so that when he was in the Pirates of the Caribbean world online, he was able to run on water, and he was like running past boats apparently, and people were complaining to Disney, how come my Jack Sparrow can't go as fast as his Jack Sparrow? And the guy, Disney ended up sending the guy a cease and desist letter saying to the effect, we don't know what you're doing, but stop it. And so what happened was, but it's a basic flaw that people don't realize, that if you take software, put it on a local system, somebody can re-engineer that local software and be able to work against your metaverse. And they can work against other people. They can bias themselves. If there's games, if there's financial transactions that require timing, they can play with that and again, tailor the thing to their personal issues.
Augmented.
Anyway. Oh, augmented for me. Okay, anyway, going back to augmented. Pretty much it's owned by the app owner. And I thought I'm doing virtual. I thought you're doing. Anyway, okay, I'll do this. Anyway, any issues are under the owner's control. So for example, if I develop a mapping application and I get my data from Google Maps and Google Maps is wrong, that's on me. People will come to me to complain. I have to do the maintenance, or you have to do the maintenance if it's your apps that you're developing and so on. And you know, you're also taking data from third parties, like I mentioned, Google Maps. You might be taking other data from like Wikipedia or other data sources. And if those are wrong, your system's wrong, and you're responsible for that. I mentioned location before. Location can be critical for some users over others. Your app is very location specific and requires things, like you need to go ahead and let people know, okay, for example, swatting. If you can change the cell phone location, you can send the police saying, I'm in trouble, come to this location and do whatever. You know, they're going to go ahead and send a SWAT team over to a location that might not be where the person actually is. And you have to start considering the implications for people changing the geographies and spoofing that, taking, for example, the third-party accuracy, like we mentioned before, if you go the wrong way down a one-way street and the thing tells you to because it doesn't read your GPS accurately and so on, those things can be problems. By the way, anybody ever like drive near the Pentagon with GPS on their devices? If you ever do that, you'll notice that all of a sudden your car's in the Potomac River because they have GPS blockers around certain government facilities, including the Pentagon. It's actually kind of cool to a point if you're not relying on it. And then there's distractions, you know, like Pokemon Go. There were literally people getting themselves killed playing Pokemon Go because they were trying to drive while playing Pokemon Go. They were trying to do other things, like they fell off cliffs and everything. And these are real problems for people who are doing this. Now, does Pokemon Go bear any responsibility for this? And people were trying to sue. So then Pokemon Go put a screen up that said, do not do this while you drive and so on. And they even put features in that if you are moving too quickly, they will not allow you to play. And so they're trying to reduce liability by putting these controls in place.
And most of these platforms have user-to-user communications, and that's for the large portion of Metaverse, and it creates quite a bit of vulnerability. As we mentioned before, it's hard to get in touch if you have an issue to bring up a dispute with the owner of the platform or that Metaverse and let someone know what's going on. And then this is where we brought up that where it facilitates crimes. You don't know what people are doing in there. They could be doing a drug deal. They could be facilitating some kind of a kidnapping. A lot of things can go on there, and it requires moderation. Again, that's high in resources, in people, and in money. Pokemon Go, you were talking about the distraction earlier. They don't have player communications, however, they did have to implement those distraction provisions to make sure people weren't dying while they were driving. Oh, that's me?
Yeah.
Okay. And then with data accuracy, as he mentioned earlier, they can spoof locations and your GPS as well. And then we have a merchandise data. If you've ever used a grocery store app, for example, is the information in there accurate? Are they leading you to the right location? Is the pricing correct? And if it's not, and you try to purchase something, what happens then? How do you moderate, and who do you contact? And are they going to get back to you?
Yeah.
Go.
Oh, that's okay. Well, then there's privacy invasion. Again, in augmented reality, there is possibly a bit of privacy that you might theoretically have, but the application itself that provides the augmentation, they need to know kind of what you're doing. Waze needs to know where you intend to go. They need to know what if you're going to buy stuff through an app or something like that, and you're going to walk in a store, they need to know exactly what you want. And you have no privacy with those regards. Now, the problem is, too many people have this perception that you are responsible for it. Too many people have the wrong perceptions, and you have to be able to deal with that if you're writing your own augmented reality app or you happen to be the user. You really need to know what your rights are and the lack thereof, which is probably more critical. Now, going on to virtual reality concerns where you're pretty much immersed, again, by definition, you have zero privacy. Your whole environment is completely reliant upon the virtual reality provider, the metaverse owner. So even IBM, for example, when they spent millions of dollars trying to buy a Second Life studio, they had no control over who goes in and out of those facilities. It's kind of bizarre where people are giving lots and lots of money to these organizations and really having no control over the privacy of their individuals, the privacy of the employees that they put there, what gets discussed, because the metaverse has to be able to carry all the audio and everything. And that's kind of critical for people when you stop and think about it, that you're going to hold proprietary meetings inside a computing environment you don't own, kind of like Zoom, for example. Anyway, people have never had a really proprietary conversation over Zoom, I don't think. But anyway, also financial transactions. Financial transactions are not within your control. If you're using Linden Bucks, if you're going offline, you're using PayPal or something, you are dealing with people one-on-one, and you don't have control over those transactions, and that's critical. Then we have legitimate identity. And I'm going to talk about this on another slide, but I'll come back to that in a second. Physical control of your domain. Pretty much, in virtual reality, you don't have control over your domain. Actually, that's a Seinfeld reference. I'll rephrase that. You don't have control over your, 10 minutes. Anyway, so we're pretty much going to try to keep to that and get people out. So anyway, you don't have control. There was one time where I was experimenting in Second Life, and I was just wandering around the Second Life universe. I walk into this building, and I'm just there, and there's like a couch, and there's somebody, an avatar sitting on a couch. And all of a sudden, the avatar gets up and says, "Get out of my house." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "No, this is my house. I paid for it." I'm like, "Are you serious? You paid for this?" And he's like, "Yes, I did." And I was debating how much of a jerk to be. And if I was just going to go ahead, walk away from my computer, leaving my avatar there to bother him. And this person spent all this money to buy a house in the middle of nowhere. But they have no control. And you need to figure out, can you exclude people? Can you exclude, like for example, retailers? They try to stop competitive retailers from knowing pricing. Can you stop your competitors from walking around your virtual stores and literally writing down and collecting pricing in an automated way so that you can competitive price things and so on? You have no control over these things. And the bottom one, harassers and criminals. There have been cases, I'll come back to that later. But anyway, credentialing, who's who. I call this the Disney princess attack. I don't know how many people know this, but if you ever go to Walt Disney World or Disneyland, you're not allowed to dress in costume as an adult. Only kids can do that. And when you stop and think, why? That's really dumb. Because you probably had some drunk woman dressed as Cinderella telling some kid to go to hell at some point in time. And you need to know that. They need to know who's interacting with people and not representing, theoretically, a Disney princess in Disneyland. But you can't stop that in the metaverse, because people can buy skins and look like anything. And if they happen to be interacting in your world, I'm not saying you're going to be in virtual Disney World, for example. Well, actually, that is a case where you can do that. But, for example, if you go into a store, somebody could dress and put on the skin. In other words, the outfit of somebody who works at that organization. So you have to start considering that. Likewise, do you know if somebody represents themselves as a doctor, are they really a doctor? In which geography are they going to be represented? If they're a mental health professional, again, you can have lunatics going ahead and masquerading as a psychiatrist on the internet and so on. Then we have avatar interactions, and this is where I was going to get back into harassment and stuff like that. Again, Pokemon Go does not allow for player-to-player communications, although people do show up in the real world. But in general, you go online, and there was a woman who complained she was sexually assaulted in a metaverse because one character came, well, like she said, a group of men came up and started doing sexual movements on her character. And, you know, Tracy was just saying, why didn't she just shut off her computer? But, you know, at the same time, the question is, which one of these are legitimate? How do you deal with this where you have somebody in a virtual world doing something that you are not the owner of your facility, and how do you kick them out? Or even if so, can you ban somebody? And these are all questions that need to be answered. There literally is no privacy when you're outsourcing your metaverse. Unless you are the metaverse owner, like you are Meta, for example, which is very rare, you are not going to be able to control this. You're creating an environment and using somebody else's environment. You're creating an environment within an environment you have no control over. And what happens if there's a privacy violation? Like, let's say you are Disney World and you give information to go into virtual Disney World, and the metaverse loses data because you don't have that data. Is Disney responsible for it, or is the metaverse responsible for it? Because they're collecting, I promise you, there will be class action lawsuits that involve this at some point in time. But again, remember, they know everything, and in the metaverse, nobody has any, nobody in their right mind should have an expectation of privacy, because whatever you do is only facilitated by the metaverse itself. Then you have ad feeds. I'm just going to say this very quickly. If you, for example, well, my old company, Walmart, what's to stop a metaverse owner from putting ads for Target into Walmart's metaverse stores? Absolutely nothing if they don't have control, because you could just have pop-ups. And in different metaverses, like many people see Waze, all of a sudden Waze will pop up a Dunkin' Donuts ad or something like that. If you're trying to go to Tom Horton Donuts and you're in Canada and that's your direction, they could just keep popping up Dunkin' Donut ads left and right. Identity, again, you have to authenticate to the metaverse. As a person in the metaverse or a company trying to do business in the metaverse, you don't control the identities of people. You don't control the digital twins. You don't control the appearances. And likewise, if somebody hacks an account of a trusted individual, that could be really, really bad. And then we're talking about customer service experts, like what happens if somebody hacks a legitimate, for example, store employee and goes around and says, oh, you want to buy this here? You should go to our competitor because they have it a lot cheaper, but don't tell anybody I told you this. And you know these things are going to be happening because I've seen this happen firsthand when I've investigated crimes and so on. Reputational harm. How many people remember the story of this woman in Central Park in New York, and she starts a white woman starts accusing this black man who told the woman to put a leash on her dog, and she calls the police saying a black man is assaulting me. Turns out that woman worked for Morgan Stanley, and everybody went ahead and was like, hey, Morgan Stanley, look at what a racist organization they are for hiring people like her. What happens if somebody does something like that in the metaverse? Again, something to consider. I talked about hacking the access points, again, my Jack Sparrow attack, because I need a cute name. Then there's the other concept of invisible man attacks. We talk about how people are having online interactions. If you can have a skin that looks like Cinderella or somebody else, you could have a skin that's invisible. And that won't appear, that you could walk around anywhere in the metaverse and people won't know you're there if you can buy an invisibility skin, which sounds ridiculous, but it's possible. Anyway, Web3, this is you and we have little time.
Yes, we do. Okay. I like to say that there's a lot of delusion around this, and it's like a house of cards. So is there really security around it? Well, not really, I guess. And it requires quite a bit of authentication. You had the 51% story, right? So it depends on who owns it, where it's being, or who owns the servers, where information is being tasked, and we had the insider trading story.
Yeah, basically with blockchain, the story Tracy's alluding to, everybody keeps saying, no, it's blockchain secure. It's like a house of cards. The technology around it isn't. So for example, if you are doing a transaction, there have been people who have blocked, for example, cryptocurrency trades, so this way they can see if the trade is going to go up or down, and they go ahead and get in before a large trade to take advantage of whichever direction it's going to move, either to short it or to long it because they know there's going to be movement on it. And anyway.
Yeah, there's been a bunch of situations. The one with NFT God, he was an influencer who would tell people about NFTs and give ideas and opinions on what they should do next. But he had a situation where he clicked on an ad-sponsored link versus an original link or an official link to download some software, and wound up downloading malware, took over his system. He lost Substack, he lost Gmail, Twitter account control, etc. And he resulted in not only a bunch of financial loss, but lost in trust with his community. So, what do we do here? In the end, he wound up saying, well, yeah, that sucks, but let's just move forward, rather than on focusing on what kind of security controls or being an advocate for security where these are concerned. And then with cryptocurrency, so DeFi is a blessing, definitely, but a major curse. And while it has built-in security, yes, there are measures that make it difficult to hack or difficult to compromise, but it doesn't make it impossible. And there's plenty of examples. We talked about FTX earlier, but Binance was one of them. It had over 500 million that was lost, and then Ronin, which is an NFT game exchange, they had over 600 million that was stolen, hacking private keys. And then DeFi was hit with bridges, which are used to transfer between exchanges or chains. Wormhole was one of those that was a large compromise, and I think that was over 360 million.
Yeah. Oh, I'll just quickly finish everything up there. Sorry, NFTs, I don't know if that was a dramatic pause, but no, anyway, if you want to see interesting research, this guy Moxie Marlinspike, he was bored one day and decided, let's hack NFTs, and he just figured out that the NFTs and blockchains are okay, but you can hack where the actual data is, because blockchain just points to a file. You can change the file, so all of a sudden you think you got the Mona Lisa, instead you got a stick figure. Then we had like Seth Green, I don't know if anybody knows the actor, but he was gonna create a TV series based on the bored monkey things, and he had the whole thing hacked, and it's like, don't you know anything about digital rights? I mean, I would just have created the TV series and let the criminals try to sue me so you can arrest them. It's bizarre, but people somehow think these are okay.
And he was actually an attorney with copyright law background, interestingly enough, and there isn't any precedent where these digital assets are concerned unless there's a physical asset tied to it.
Yeah, so basically all these NFTs are worthless and they're easy to hack. Now, potential countermeasures. You can love or hate Taylor Swift, but the reality was FTX, I don't know how many people saw the story, but FTX asked Taylor Swift to be a celebrity endorser and offered her $100 million that she turned down because she asked the simple question, is this a regulated or unregulated currency? And they go, unregulated. She said, no way in hell, and turned down $100 million. But here's the big thing. You have to be aware of this because, frankly, a lot of what's going on is not within your technical control if you're going to be a vendor on, sorry, we're like out of time. But anyway, so I'm going really even quicker than that. But anyway, you really need to do red teaming, brainstorming to figure out what's right, what's wrong, and the what ifs of the situation. Contracts, make sure you have good contracts to control your resources as best as possible. How can you go ahead and get people to help you as quickly as possible? Supply chain security, we haven't touched upon that. It's a buzzword, but it's really critical these days to really check the supply chain of the software that's being embedded in everything you do, because that can ruin your whole environment really, really quickly. And then moderation, make sure you moderate. If nothing else, please, please, please moderate your environment so people can get some help and have some recourse if they have a problem. And again, if you build a metaverse, unfortunately, they will come. I wish they wouldn't. I wish there'd be more thought. But again, like Web 1, not Web 3, Web 1 did not have any embedded security until version 1.2 of the Mosaic browser was the first time they enabled a password. Web 1 was around for almost a year before anybody put cybersecurity into play. So again, get ahead of it.
And if you listen to any of our other presentations, you understand that our thesis is that the error doesn't just reside with the user, right? It isn't just the stupid user that's happening here. We need, as professionals, to look at the entire environment, all of the components that come into anything that we're building, including anything on Web3 or Metaverse.
Yeah. Anyway, buy our books. They're wonderful.
They are.
Especially you can. And any questions, let us know, because frankly, sorry, but getting all of Web3 problem out, we could be here for another 3 years at the moment.
Especially with all the stories that Ira has.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
I guess if you have questions, we'll wait around, but everybody has other sessions to get to. So anyway, thanks so much for coming. We appreciate it.